If you're hearing this, it means I finally got scared enough to tell the truth. I've started and stopped this recording more times than I can count. I've changed motels, changed burner phones, changed my name on 2 leases. I've thrown away badges, IDs, anything with my picture on it. I've tried to convince myself that leaving the department was about politics or stress or the kind of burnout every cop in Chicago claims to have after 20 years. But that's not why I walked away. I quit because of Lower Wacker Drive. No, that's not right. Not because of the drive. Not because of the homeless camps or the dealers or the girls who never quite make it out. I quit because of something under it. Because of something that learned my name. You know that part of the city, right? Everyone does, even if they've never been. You've seen it in movies, car chases, gritty TV shows, the low concrete ceiling, the dim yellow lights, the echoes of engines and tires on wet pavement. Whenever they need to make Chicago look dangerous, they go straight to Lower Wacker. But cameras don't catch the parts I saw, or they don't keep that footage. I was a detective for 15 years. Violent crimes. Before that, patrol. You spend that long in this city. You learn the rhythms of it. Friday night domestic calls. Payday robberies. Winter suicides. Summer shootings. We had a joke in my unit that you could set your watch by the first 911 call every Sunday morning. Human behavior becomes predictable. Ugly, but predictable. What happened down there didn't fit. I want you to understand something before I start. I'm not superstitious. Or, I wasn't. I wrote reports. I testified. I believed in what I could photograph, measure, file. Guys like me, we see the worst shit people do to each other. And we cling to the idea that it's still people doing it. Once you let that go, everything unravels. That's why this has been eating at me. It didn't match anything in the handbook. It didn't belong in a case file. And every time I tried to type it out, the words got wrong. I'd read back what I'd written, and it felt like someone else's account. Like the details were just slightly off. Enough to make me doubt myself. Enough to make me think I was losing it. Not real. Real. Not real. They tell you, when you start, that sometimes a case will follow you home. They mean the guilt, the unsolved ones, the victims' faces. But this was different. I brought something back with me. Or, it followed without asking. I can't decide which idea makes me feel worse. This recording is the first time I'm telling it straight through, beginning to end. No supervisor, no partner, no city attorney hovering in the doorway. Just me, and whatever cheap tape this machine's got in it. I don't know who you are, how you found this, or why you pressed play. Maybe you're another cop. Maybe you're some internet ghoul who loves stories about cursed places. Maybe you just got curious because of the title someone scrawled on the case. The Chicago detective who quit after what he found beneath Lower Wacker Drive. Dramatic, huh? I didn't write that. I don't label my own nightmares. But it's accurate enough. What I'm going to tell you cost me my career, my marriage, my sense of what was possible in this world. I'm not saying that for sympathy. I just want you to feel the weight of it before you decide whether to keep listening. Because once you hear certain things, you don't get to unknow them. You start noticing echoes where there shouldn't be echoes. You start hearing your name in places you've never been. You start wondering, every time someone stops you to ask for directions, whether that's really a person in front of you. You know what's funny? There's not even an official case number attached to this. Not the whole thing, anyway. There's a cluster of missing persons reports, scattered over 3 years. There's a couple of internal memos about resource allocation, patrol rotations, vagrancy sweeps. On paper, it looks like a patchwork of social problems. Poverty, mental illness, crime of opportunity, the usual. But when you lay the pins on the map, when you draw the lines between them, they all dip just under the surface of the city. Parking structures, service tunnels, maintenance corridors, the forgotten arteries that the tourists never see. And right at the center of that web, glowing like a sickness, is Lower Wacker. I didn't see the pattern at first. Another detective did. A young guy from another unit, the kind who still believes he can fix the world if he just works enough overtime. He dropped a file on my desk one afternoon, said something like, "Tell me I'm crazy, but this looks wrong, right?" I should have done what I usually do with that kind of thing. Nod, make a joke, tell him to take it to his own sergeant. Instead, I opened the folder. Not real. Real. Not real. I can smell that day when I think about it. Stale coffee, winter on the air from the cracked window, old carpet ground down under too many boots. The station house humming with the usual background noise of phones, radios, someone laughing too loudly down the hall at something that wasn't really funny. Ordinary, solid, safe, and then these faces looking up at me from the photographs. 7, at first. Men and women, different ages, different backgrounds. The only thing they had in common was the last place anyone could say for sure they'd been. A ride-share drop-off near Lower Wacker. A last text saying, "Walking through the underpass now." A security camera still of someone stepping off the sidewalk toward the ramps. 7 wasn't enough to raise alarms. Not in a city like ours. People disappear here all the time. Some don't want to be found. Some get found where the lake gives them back. But as I flipped through the pages, I felt something tighten behind my lungs. Like I was looking at a crossword puzzle with one obvious missing word, and nobody else saw it. When you've been doing this long enough, your instincts start whispering before your brain can catch up. Mine were very simple. That day, this isn't random. I want to be clear, before we go any further, that I am not accusing any person of anything. There's no human perp at the end of this story. If that helps you sleep better, you can stop here. Fold the tape back in its case. Tell yourself the ex-detective lost his mind. We're good. You never heard this. But if you're still listening, then you already feel it, don't you? That little tug in your gut, like when you walk into a room and realize something has been moved an inch to the left. Like when you stand on a train platform and, for no reason you can explain, you take half a step back from the edge. There are places in cities like Chicago where the rules get thin. The official maps show streets and blocks and zoning codes, all neat and labeled. But underneath that, there's a different kind of map, one made of habit and sound and fear. Where people don't walk alone, where old stories pile up, where things that aren't supposed to exist become useful. Lower Wacker is one of those places. You feel it when you drive through, even in broad daylight, the way the sky disappears above you, the way the light never quite reaches the corners. It's a place made for in-between things, between upper and lower, rich and poor, seen and unseen. If you were something that wanted to watch people, to learn them, to wear them, that's where you'd go. Where the cars slow down, where voices echo, where nobody looks too closely at someone standing just out of the light. I didn't know any of that when I picked up the file. I just knew 7 people had gone missing along the same stretch of concrete and steel. And nobody with bars on their shoulders seemed to care. So I cared. I opened that folder, and in a way, it opened me. It carved out a little space in my life, in my attention, and something crawled in and made itself. At home, I didn't see it yet. Not its face, not its shape, but it saw me. It heard my name. It learned the rhythm of my footsteps, the way my voice bounced off those low ceilings. Not real, real, not real. This is me, finally, trying to put the pattern into words before it finishes with me. Before I forget how it started and only remember what it became. If you keep listening, I'll take you with me. Back under the river. Back to the yellow lights and the humming concrete. Back to the first night I walked beneath Lower Wacker Drive and heard someone call out, "Officer, can you help me?" in a voice that sounded almost, but not quite, like my own. I signed the case out under a temporary number, the way you do when you're not sure if it's really a case yet. Just a stack of missing persons tied together with a rubber band and a note in my handwriting that said, "Possible geographic link, Lower Wacker Corridor." I remember the way my pen felt in my hand when I wrote that. Heavy. Like the ink itself didn't want to be part of this. The younger detective who'd brought it to me, Morales, hovered by my desk while I flipped through the pages again. He was one of those clean-cut kids, hair still fighting the regulations, eyes too bright for the job. He pointed at the last page. "You see it, right?" he said. "The GPS pings. The text timestamps. It's all in the same chunk. Same few blocks. I traced the locations with my thumb. Different nights, different weather, different excuses for being there. But always crossing through the same underpass, the same knot of concrete where the city twisted in on itself. Could be coincidence," I said, "because that's what you say. Coincidence is the department's favorite word. It's easy. It doesn't cost overtime." Morales shrugged, but he didn't back off. "Yeah, could be," he said. "Could also be that we've got something bad down there. Worse than usual." That stuck with me. Worse than usual. On Lower Wacker, usual was already pretty bad. "Fine," I said. "I'll take a ride through. You happy?" He grinned like I'd just promised him a promotion. "Let me know what you see." I didn't let him come with me. Not because I didn't trust him, because I did. That was the problem. Lower Wacker in the daylight is one thing. Lower Wacker toward dusk, when the city starts to blur, is another thing entirely. I went alone, like an idiot. No backup, no real plan, just a sedate unit car and a file rattling on the passenger seat. I drove down the ramp where the GPS pings clustered. The ceiling dropped low enough that I felt like ducking. The last smear of daylight disappeared behind me. Up above, the downtown streets glittered like they belonged to a different world entirely. Down here, everything was duller, slower. Far-off engines, a stray honk, the drip of something from a pipe overhead. Beneath cities, all the noises change. They stretch. They smear along the walls. That's one of those things you know with your body more than your brain. You feel it in your teeth. I rolled to a crawl, eyes flicking from the lanes to the sidewalks to the shadowed alcoves where service doors sat flush with concrete. Some of the doors had numbers. Some didn't. Some were painted over. A few were just blank seams where the lines didn't quite match. I told myself I was just getting a feel for the area, doing what we always do. Walk the ground. See what makes sense and what doesn't. Not real. Real. Not real. I pulled the car over near a delivery bay and stepped out. The air hit me colder than I expected, smelling faintly of exhaust and river water. There was a line of footprints in some old patch of dirt near the wall, but they were too smudged and mismatched to read. Some homeless camps had left traces, burned paper, broken bottles, dark piles that I didn't look at too closely. There's a kind of folklore among the guys who work night shifts in this city. Talk to enough squad car veterans, tow truck drivers, parking enforcement, and they'll all have a favorite ghost story. A woman in white on Lakeshore Drive. A hitchhiker who vanishes before the next off-ramp. A man with no face who stands under certain streetlights, waiting. I always chalked those up to boredom and booze. Down there, remembering those stories, they didn't feel so funny anymore. I walked slowly along the sidewalk, the car's hazard lights ticking away behind me. The tunnels curved just enough that you never got a straight line of sight very far ahead. Headlights would appear and disappear like thoughts you couldn't quite hold. Every so often, I'd see a mark on the concrete, a circle, a jagged line. Most of it was just graffiti, tags and symbols I recognized from other neighborhoods. But some of it felt different. Simple shapes, repeated in odd places near drains, beside doors, next to support pillars. They were drawn in something pale and faint, like chalk that had been rained on and dried again. When I brushed one with my fingers, it left almost nothing on my skin, but the concrete felt oddly warm. I told myself it was my imagination. Heat from some pipe, friction from passing tires. Not real. Real. Not real. Halfway down the stretch where the last known phone ping had been recorded, I stopped and just listened. There's always noise in a place like that. But underneath the obvious sounds, there was something else. A kind of pattern. Footsteps, maybe. Or the memory of them. Like somebody had walked this route 100 times and the echoes were still bouncing between the pillars. I tried to map the case onto the space. One woman, coming back from a late shift, cutting through the underpass to save 10 minutes. One man, drunk and overconfident, leaving a bar, deciding the cab was too expensive. Another who had a fight with his girlfriend, stormed out, texted that he was walking downtown, whatever. The last message from him had included a blurry photo, probably meant as a joke. A shot taken from shoulder height, facing the tunnel, headlights in the distance, concrete ceiling, and a figure, barely visible near the edge of the frame, that everyone assumed was a trick of the light. I stood in what I guessed was the same spot, turned my phone's screen on and held it up, camera facing forward. The image on the screen showed the tunnel, the hazy depth, the reflections on the pavement. For a moment my heart stalled. Sure, I'd see that same shape in the edge of the frame. Nothing. I exhaled, slowly. I didn't realize until then that I'd been holding my breath. Get a grip, I muttered to myself. My voice sounded small against all that concrete. That's when I noticed the man standing farther down. He was maybe 40 yards ahead, off to the side, near one of the unmarked doors. I don't know how long he'd been there. 1 second the tunnel was empty. The next, he was just part of it. Like I'd missed a frame and he'd stepped in during the glitch. Nothing about him looked unusual from that distance. Average height, average build, wearing a dark suit and what might have been a tie. One hand resting lightly against the wall, as if he'd stopped mid-stride and forgotten what he was doing. I called out, automatic. Sir, everything all right? The man turned his head toward me. If you want to know when you stop being just a cop and start being something else, pray. Maybe it's the moment you realize you've just given your voice to whatever's listening. He didn't answer. Not at first. Just stood there, head tilted a fraction too long, like a dog, hearing a high sound. As I started walking toward him, something about his posture bothered me. People waiting for help usually hunch in on themselves, or wave, or shuffle from foot to foot. He was too still, balanced. His hand against the wall didn't look like support. It looked like contact. Sir? I tried again. Are you hurt? You need help? I was close enough now to see his face more clearly. Dark hair, pale skin, features that could have belonged to half the businessmen in the loop. But his expression was wrong. It was a couple of seconds behind the conversation. When I spoke, his mouth twitched like it was reacting to something I hadn't said yet. His eyes didn't quite find mine. They seemed to be tracking something over my shoulder or behind my eyes. Not real, not real. When he finally did speak, his voice surprised me. Not because of how it sounded, but because it sounded so normal. Officer, he said, with this careful politeness. Standard enough question for a lost tourist or a drunk who'd forgotten where he parked. But there was a quality to the way he said it. A measured cadence, like he was reciting a line he'd practiced. Every syllable placed precisely. No slur, no hesitation. Just a man-shaped mouth putting together a sentence-shaped sound. Sure, I said, because that's what you say. Where'd you last see it? His smile came half a beat late, like a reply lagging on a bad phone connection. I seem to have misplaced my car, he repeated. Could you help me find it? My skin prickled. Something cold crawled up from my stomach into my throat. You already said that, I told him. He blinked. The movement was slow, deliberate, like closing and reopening a curtain. It's very dark down here, he said. I seem to have misplaced my car. For one moment, one unbearable moment, I had the distinct sensation that he wasn't talking to me, that he was talking to the space between us, that he was practicing, adjusting, trying out the words the way a tongue gets used to a new tooth. I should have backed off, called for backup, logged it as a suspicious person and gone home. But the job trains you to engage, to search, to close distance rather than open it. So I kept walking toward him. 10 more feet, 5. I lifted my hand slightly, non-threatening. Look, sir. If you're confused, we can. That's as far as I got. Because now I was close enough to see his face properly. And what I saw made my brain stutter. The features were all there: eyes, nose, mouth. The usual arrangement. But they weren't synchronized. His smile stretched a fraction of a second before his eyes crinkled. His brow furrowed just after his mouth went neutral. Tiny lags, tiny delays, as if someone was moving levers behind a mask and hadn't quite learned the timing yet. Not real, not real. The worst part wasn't the way he looked. It was the way he watched me, noticing. There was a glint in his gaze. Not of malice, but of interest. Like a student watching a teacher react to a test answer. I realized my hand had drifted toward my holster without me meaning to. Old habit, old comfort. Sir, I said quietly, I'm going to need you to tell me your name. His lips parted. The sound that came out was almost my own voice. Detective, he said. And then he stepped backward into the shadow of the unmarked door, and he was gone. No turn, no fumbling for a handle. No physical movement that matched what my eyes were telling me. 1 second he occupied that space, a volume of air in a suit-shaped outline. The next second, there was just the wall, the seam of the door, and me standing there with my mouth open. I walked the last few yards faster than I meant to. There was nowhere he could have gone. The door was flush and locked, the sidewalk bare, the nearest ramp too far to have reached without me seeing. The air where he'd been standing felt colder, as if the warmth of a human body had never been there at all. Not real, not real. I told myself I'd misjudged the distance, that he'd walked away while my attention flickered, that I was tired, that the low light and the echoing space were playing tricks on me. That's what I told myself. But the part of me that had been doing this job for too long whispered something else, low and unwelcome. It heard your rank, it heard your voice, and it tried your words on for size. I didn't sleep that night. I went home, shut the blinds, turned off every light, and sat at my kitchen table, replaying every second of that encounter. My rational mind kept looking for a way out, a plausible explanation, some angle I'd missed, a human suspect, a prank, a misunderstanding. But the deeper part of me, the instincts honed by years of telling truth from story, danger from coincidence, knew better. People don't vanish like that. They don't speak like that. They don't wear expressions that lag behind their words. Not real, not real. The next morning, I went back to the station early. Morales was at his desk, eyes bloodshot from whatever night shift he'd pulled. You check it out? He asked, leaning back in his chair. I checked it out, I said. And? I wanted to tell him everything. But the words felt heavy in my mouth, like they belonged in a different language. There was a guy down there, middle-aged, suit, acting strange. He might have been involved. Morales raised an eyebrow. Strange. How? I shook my head. Hard to explain. I think he was confused. Maybe off his meds. I'm going back tonight to see if I can find him. You want backup? No. It came out too fast. His eyes narrowed a little, like he could sense something in my tone. All right, he said. But be careful. That area's a black hole. Radio's cut out. GPS goes screwy. I'd go with you, but I'm stuck on a follow-up today. I nodded and pretended that was fine. The truth? I didn't want anyone near that thing. Not until I knew what it was. I spent the rest of the day combing through phone records, camera feeds, witness statements. Anything that tied the missing people to Lower Wacker. A pattern emerged, slow and uneasy. Each victim had reported seeing someone unusual shortly before vanishing. Not always directly, sometimes a passing mention, sometimes a line buried in a text. Saw a guy acting weird near the underpass. This dude won't stop staring. Some guy keeps waving at cars. Then nothing. Messages ended there. Calls unanswered. And each one of those last descriptions matched the man I'd seen. Same suit, same posture, same uncanny stillness. I kept replaying the way his mouth moved, the slight delay, the strange precision. By the time dusk came, the case files were scattered across my desk like a broken mosaic. I told myself I was going back to gather evidence, but in truth, I was going back because I couldn't stay away. The area came alive differently at night. Not with people, there were hardly any here after dark, but with the city itself. The overhead lights pulsated in faint, uneven brightness. The hum of distant traffic vibrated through the pavement. I parked the unmarked car near the same delivery bay and stepped out. This time, I walked slower. Everything looked the same as the night before, yet the place held a new tension. The shadows seemed to lean forward, listening. The concrete ceiling felt lower, as if the whole underpass had descended a few inches while I'd been gone. I kept close to the wall, crossing the spot where the man had stood. No trace of him remained. No footprints, no discarded belongings, no proof he'd ever existed at all, but I knew he had. I felt it in the same way you feel someone watching you from across a quiet room. Some impressions don't leave marks on the ground, they leave marks in the air. I reached the unmarked door he'd stepped through or into. More accurately, I pushed it. Locked solid. Rusted hinges, old municipal paint, the kind of door nobody uses unless they have a key and a reason. I stepped back, scanning the area for cameras. There were 3 mounted at intervals, none of them pointing directly toward this door. Another coincidence. Or maybe someone wanted it that way. I walked farther along the underpass, noting new markings on the wall. More chalk-like symbols, more warm concrete beneath my touch. The warmth felt stronger this time, pulsing faintly, like something alive was pressing from the other side. I pulled my hand away quickly. Halfway down the block, I saw movement. A figure stepped from behind a support pillar. Same build as the night before. Same posture. Hands resting too gently at his sides. Like he'd memorized how a person stands without understanding why. My breath caught in my chest. He took one step toward me, then stopped. His head tilted, just a hair too slow. Then he spoke. Detective. It was my voice. Not an impression of it. Not a similarity. My exact tone. My exact pacing. The kind of mimicry you can only achieve when you've heard someone speak 1,000 times. But he'd only heard me twice. My hand moved to my holster out of reflex, though I didn't draw. Shooting some thing that could behave like this didn't feel useful. The rules had shifted. Guns were for people. What do you want? I asked. The figure's mouth opened, and once again the expression began a fraction before the words. I seemed to have misplaced my car. Could you help me find it? Same phrase. Same delivery. A sentence carved into its memory, worn smooth from repetition. But now, the smile tugged wider, more confident, as though it had practiced the timing since last night. You have to stop saying that, I told it. Try something else. It blinked. A slow, deliberate curtain of motion. Then it tried again. Could you help me? It sounded more natural this time. Less rehearsed. More like it understood the request. What are you? I asked. The figure tilted its head further, stretching the angle until the movement verged on unnatural. It took another step toward me. Its shoes made no sound. Not real. Real. Not real. I am looking, it said. Looking for what? A pause. A small, thoughtful furrowing of the brow. Then, a face. Cold spread down my spine. Whose face? I asked quietly. Its mouth twitched. Its eyes flicked over me like a scanner. A face that fits. I stepped back instinctively. And something changed in it. The way its posture lifted. The way its shoulders squared. Like recognition. Like interest. Then it began walking toward me. Slowly. Patiently. Each step too controlled. Too balanced. I stepped back again. My fingers brushed the grip of my gun. Stop, I warned. It didn't stop. It kept walking until I raised my hand again and barked, stop, with full command in my voice. This time, it froze instantly. Identically. As if someone had pulled the strings taut. I realized something then. Something that chilled me deeper than anything else that had happened so far. It wasn't reacting to my tone. It was copying the moment my muscles tightened. It was learning me. "What do you want with me?" I asked again. It stood still for several seconds. Then, in a voice flat and unfinished, as though the words were still drying inside its mouth, it said, "You come back, alone." It didn't move, didn't blink. "Why do you care if I'm alone?" I pressed. Another pause. Then, "Alone makes your shape clear." My shape? My shape? That was when I understood fully that this thing was not following me by chance. It wasn't just wandering Lower Wacker waiting for strangers. It had chosen me. It wanted something from me. Something it hadn't learned from the others. Something about speech, or movement, or identity itself. Something about being human. My radio crackled suddenly static, bursting through the tunnel, sharp enough to make me jump. When I looked back at the figure, it was gone again. Not walking away. Not running. Gone. The air where it had stood felt hollow. For several long seconds, I didn't move. I couldn't. The tunnel around me shifted in depth, like the concrete itself was breathing. Every instinct in me screamed to get back to the car, to get out, to get light above me and sky overhead. I walked backward until my shoulder blades hit the patrol car. I slid into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it. Even though that meant nothing. As I drove away, the same phrase looped through my mind, tighter and tighter, like a mantra twisted into a warning. Not real. Real. Not real. I couldn't shake the feeling that a pair of eyes was still watching me through the dark. And for the first time since becoming a cop, I felt the unmistakable certainty that something had marked me. Something intelligent. Something patient. Something that wanted my face. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself that what I'd seen was some kind of hallucination born of stress. That maybe I'd finally hit the edge of what the job could carve out of a man before he broke. But each time I tried to put distance between myself and that night, something pulled me back. A nagging pressure behind the ribs. A quiet tapping at the base of my thoughts, like a drip from a pipe you can't ignore. I kept circling the same truth, whether I wanted to admit it or not. It had spoken my voice. Not mimicked it. Spoken it. And it wanted me alone. I spent the next morning reviewing footage. City cameras, traffic feeds, pedestrian sensors. Anything that faced Lower Wacker, even tangentially. But the deeper I dug, the more obvious it became that the city didn't want anyone looking too hard. Cameras near the underpass were consistently offline. Footage was corrupted or missing entire minutes. Timestamps jumped backwards or froze altogether. A few feeds worked just fine until the moment someone walked into frame. Then they blurred, distorted, or cut out until after the person was gone. Coincidence becomes something else when it repeats that consistently. Morales stopped by my desk in the afternoon. He dropped a cup of coffee beside me and leaned a hip on the corner of my desk. "You look like hell," he said. "Been a long week." "It's Tuesday." I didn't answer. He sighed and lowered his voice. "You ever get the feeling the city hides things from us?" he asked casually. I looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "We write up the reports. They disappear into some server nobody has access to. Cameras go down. Evidence gets misplaced. Official explanations get emailed from an account nobody's ever met in person. Like, there's another department inside the department, supervising from the shadows." I stared at him for a moment. "Where'd that come from?" A buddy in traffic said, "The whole underpass area has been flagged for infrastructure instability. Whatever that means. Engineers go in, don't come out for hours, then report everything's fine." He paused, frowning. "They never take pictures. They never bring back readings." "Engineers don't carry cameras?" I asked. "They used to." His uncertainty was contagious. I felt myself wanting to tell him about the man, about the way he stood and spoke and vanished. But something in me hesitated. Morales was young, good, bright, and whatever had taken an interest in me didn't need another face to study. "I'll handle it," I said. He looked like he wanted to argue. Then he thought better of it. "Fine. But I'm telling you, something's rotten in that stretch. Even the tow guys avoid it." When Morales walked away, I stared at his empty chair and wondered how long I could keep pretending this was still a missing persons case. Whatever this thing was, it didn't leave fingerprints. It didn't show up on video. The only physical traces it left were chalk-like marks on concrete and unnatural warmth seeping through stone. Around noon, I logged into the departmental archive and searched for mentions of unmarked doors, Lower Wacker, maintenance tunnels, and structural anomalies. Most results were routine. But buried deep in a scanned memo from the 70s, I found something interesting. A handwritten note in the margin read, "Acoustic irregularities reported by crew. Sounds like footsteps following. No visual confirmation." Another page from the 90s described a non-human echo profile, though the handwriting was smudged. One entry simply said, "Tell teams not to answer voices unless visually verified." My skin tightened as I read that last line. Don't answer voices. Don't answer. The problem was, I already had. That night, against every instinct screaming in my bones, I returned to Lower Wacker. I told myself I was collecting evidence, verifying details, doing due diligence. But a quieter, more honest voice knew better. I wasn't going back for the case. I was going back because I needed to understand why it had chosen me. This time, I parked farther away and approached on foot. The city was colder than the last time I'd come, the kind of cold that sharpens the edges of everything. My steps echoed in uneven rhythm, half a beat behind me, just like before. I kept turning, expecting to see someone. Nobody there. The underpass smelled of damp concrete, old machinery, and something metallic I couldn't place. A faint ringing hum vibrated through the walls, like the infrastructure itself was groaning under strain. I reached the location of the first encounter and stopped. The unmarked door sat flush against the concrete, unmoving, indifferent. The space felt charged, like a storm had passed through recently. I took a deep breath and began to examine the area more closely. Patterns emerged I hadn't noticed the night before. The chalk markings weren't random graffiti. They formed a sequence. Circles, angled lines, geometric symbols arranged around certain pillars, like someone or something was mapping vibrations or marking boundaries. One symbol appeared more frequently than the others, a long vertical line intersected by a short horizontal slash near the top, almost like a crude key. I crouched down to study one of them more closely. When I touched it, the concrete vibrated under my fingertips. I jerked my hand back. The vibration faded instantly. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't want to know. At the far end of the tunnel, I saw movement again. Not a figure this time, but a shadow skittering across the wall in a direction that didn't match any light source. It moved too fast, then too slow, stretching and compressing in ways shadows shouldn't. I stayed very still. The shadow paused. Then it elongated, rising along the concrete pillar like something unfurling itself from a tight coil. I felt it before I saw it clearly, the awareness, the attention, like a spotlight of consciousness swinging my way. I wasn't alone. For several breaths, nothing happened. Then, a faint shape separated itself from the darkness. A familiar outline. A man in a suit. Still, waiting, balanced too perfectly on his feet. He didn't step forward this time, didn't speak, didn't tilt his head at the wrong angle. He simply watched me, and I realized that was new. He hadn't watched before. Not like this. He'd studied, mimicked, observed. But this staring had intention behind it. Purpose. Evaluation. It was learning what scared me. I felt an old instinct rise, the one that tells you not to run in front of a predator. I kept my posture neutral, breath slow, expression unreadable. "Why are you following me?" I asked. The figure didn't speak. Instead, something shifted behind its eyes. A flicker. like a curtain being drawn slowly across a hidden room. "You come back," it said at last. But the voice wasn't mine this time. It wasn't the polished phrase from before. It sounded closer to human, closer to something finding its footing in the world. "You come alone," it added. I forced myself not to step back. "What do you want?" A pause. Then, "Faces fit when alone." My pulse hammered. "What does that mean?" "Your face doesn't stay still when others are near," it said. "It changes. Hard to see the true shape." "My true shape?" It nodded slowly. "People wear many. Hard to choose the right one." A cold understanding settled in me. This thing wasn't just copying voices or expressions. It was studying identity, personality, behavior. It was choosing what to become, choosing who to wear. "Why the missing people?" I asked. "What happened to them?" Another tilt of the head, another slow blink. "They did not fit." "Fit what?" "Fit me." The simplicity of the answer was worse than anything else it could have said. I felt a wave of dread, so complete it seemed to hollow out my chest. There was no threat in its voice, not yet. Just curiosity. A child with too much strength, and no concept of consequences. "Why me?" I whispered, not sure if I wanted an answer. Its mouth twitched upward, almost but not quite a smile. "You come back," it said again, as if the explanation should be obvious. "You come back, you come back, you come back." The phrase repeated with slight variations in tone, like it was testing inflection, emotion, intent. My stomach turned. Then it stepped backward smoothly, coherently, and vanished behind a pillar. I rushed forward this time, desperate to confirm what my mind refused to accept. But when I rounded the pillar, there was nothing but cold wall and empty air. Gone again. Not real. Real. But I knew the truth. It wasn't disappearing. It was choosing when to be seen, and it wanted me to see it. I didn't go home after that encounter. Home felt too vulnerable, too quiet, too shaped like a place where a man might let his guard down. Instead, I drove aimlessly along upper and lower levels of the city, circling blocks until my gaslight flickered. The streets felt tighter than usual, as if Chicago had begun folding inward, angling itself so that every route curved back toward Lower Wacker. The city does that, sometimes, not literally. Not in a way you can photograph, but in a way you can feel. There are nights when Chicago funnels you, guides you, pushes you toward whatever it thinks you deserve. Sometimes that's a bar. Sometimes it's a mistake. Sometimes it's the truth. I eventually parked outside a 24-hour diner on Wabash and sat in the car watching my own reflection in the windshield. I looked normal. Tired, maybe. Unshaven, but normal. Nothing in my face hinted that something out there wanted to wear it. Nothing in my expression betrayed that I'd begun repeating a silent mantra under my breath. Not real. Real. Not real. I forced myself inside the diner. The warmth, the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation. All of it felt alien, like walking into a memory instead of a room. I took a booth in the back and pretended to examine the menu. But my eyes kept drifting to the door. Every time it opened, I tensed. Every time someone walked past my booth, I watched their gait too closely. Every time I heard a voice from another table, I waited for it to slip into my own cadence. The waitress eventually came to take my order. I didn't remember speaking to her, but she nodded like I had and walked away with her pen tucked behind her ear. When she returned with food, I stared at the plate and realized I had no appetite. My thoughts wouldn't sit in order. They scattered, jittery, circling back to the same points. The way it blinked too slowly. The way it formed words like someone assembling a puzzle. The way it spoke my voice without hesitation. But more than anything, the way it watched me. You don't need supernatural training to know when you've been singled out. People sense it. Animals sense it. Something old in the body recognizes attention that is neither benign nor fully understood. That attention pulls at you, reshapes your instincts, rewires your sense of safety. Around 3 a.m, I realized I couldn't sit there any longer. I paid the bill, left a tip that was too large, and walked back to the car with a rising dread I couldn't ignore. Home might have been dangerous, but staying out in the open felt worse. I drove to my apartment building, a small 2-story brick structure that always smelled faintly of mildew. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. As I reached my floor, I paused, listening. My hallway was quiet, but an inexplicable familiarity pressed against me, like I'd walked into a room someone had just left. Inside my apartment, everything looked untouched. Furniture where it belonged. Mail stacked near the door. A half-finished jigsaw puzzle on the coffee table. But the air felt wrong. Too still, too intentional. I walked from room to room, checking closets, corners, windows, nothing. My brain screamed that this meant nothing, that it didn't need doors or windows the way people did. I slept on the couch, if you could call it sleep. Every time I drifted off, I jolted awake, with the sense that someone had whispered my name right beside my ear. But the room remained empty. By morning, my nerves were raw. My coffee tasted like metal. My hands shook as I buttoned my shirt. I thought about calling in sick, but that felt like exactly the kind of deviation a predator would pay attention to. So I went to work. And work had changed. People avoided eye contact. Conversations hushed when I walked by. Files I'd requested the day before had been taken off my desk without explanation. When I asked records, they insisted nothing had been checked out. When I checked the logs, my request had been erased. Something was covering tracks, smoothing edges, wiping fingerprints not mine, but the city's. And I didn't know if it was human bureaucracy or something older, deeper, built into the bones of Chicago itself. Around noon, Morales approached with a folder under his arm. He looked uncomfortable. "Boss wants to see you," he said quietly. "Which boss?" I asked. He hesitated. "The boss." That meant my commander. I followed Morales down the hallway, trying to calm the instinct gnawing beneath my ribs. We stopped outside her door. Morales opened it and gestured for me to enter. Commander Leland sat behind her desk, face unreadable. "Detective," she said. "Close the door." I did. She tapped a pen against a half-finished report. "I've had some concerns raised regarding your recent activity." "What concerns?" "You've logged hours in areas outside your assigned district, conducted field checks without authorization, accessed archived materials without a clearance request." "I'm working a case," I said. She nodded once. "Yes. A case that doesn't officially exist." "It does exist. 7 missing persons." "Missing persons not assigned to you," she interrupted. "Detective, we cannot afford officers chasing shadows in a city already stretched thin." "Shadows." She said it with emphasis, like the word had a weight I wasn't allowed to touch. "I'm telling you," I said, forcing the tension out of my voice. "There is something dangerous in that corridor. Something intelligent." "What kind of something?" she asked calmly. The truth stuck in my throat. I saw Morales through the small window in the door, looking anxious, pretending not to listen. "If I say it out loud," I said, "you're going to think I'm losing my mind." "Try me." I opened my mouth. No sound came out, not because I hesitated, because I genuinely didn't know how to describe it anymore. Like the memory had been rubbed smooth, the details slipping through my fingers like water. The commander watched me struggle, her expression tightening just slightly. "Detective," she said quietly, "I'm reassigning you for 72 hours. Mandatory leave. Clear your head. Get some sleep. You'll return next week." It wasn't a request. It was a dismissal. I drove home in a daze. My body felt hollow, like something had scooped out the middle and left only the outer shell moving through its routines. I tried to sleep again that afternoon. Didn't manage it. At sunset, I finally admitted a truth I'd been circling for days. It was changing me, subtly, quietly, pulling threads out of my memory, rearranging pieces of what I believed was possible. My thoughts came in loops. My dreams, when they happened, came layered with moments I didn't remember living. Shadows, moving behind concrete pillars. A voice practicing my laugh. Footsteps matching mine, half a beat behind. Not real. Real. Not real. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table staring at the dark window, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered it. And my own voice said, calm and polite, "Detective, could you help me?" My heart nearly stopped. I didn't hang up, because something inside me whispered that, if I did, it would come through the door instead, or through the wall, or through the thin membrane of silence that separated my mind from its reach. My voice continued. I seemed to have misplaced my car. Could you help me find it? Then the call ended. Just a click. I sat still for a long time. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. My breath came in shallow pulls. Then, slowly, deliberately, someone knocked on the apartment floor beneath my feet. 3 times. But I lived on the first floor. There was no one beneath me. Not real? Real? Not real? I didn't move. Because I finally understood. It wasn't just watching me. It was practicing. I didn't call the department. I didn't call Morales. I didn't call anyone. The knock beneath my floorboards, 3 slow, deliberate taps, told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't a warning. It was a rehearsal. A new sound it had learned. A new way to announce itself. A new attempt at human behavior, practiced with the patience of something that had all the time in the world. I sat on the couch without breathing for what felt like an hour. Nothing else happened. No voices. No knock at the door. No shadow moving beneath the crack of light on the floor. Eventually, I convinced myself I could stand, that I wasn't going to collapse under the weight of what might still be listening. I packed a bag, not clothes, just a notebook. The case files, the temporary badge number, and the little tape recorder I'm speaking into now. I didn't plan to run. I planned to document, to gather proof before the thing behind Lower Wacker smoothed my memories into something unrecognizable, because that was happening. Slowly but unmistakably. When I tried to recall the exact slope of the tunnel where I'd first seen it, the angle shifted in my mind. When I tried to picture the symbols on the wall, the shapes blurred. When I imagined the man's face, features swapped positions. Eyelids slipping into wrong timings. It was rewriting the event behind my eyes. Or I was losing my grip on reality. Not real, real, not real. Either way, I had to face it again. That night, I drove back to Lower Wacker Drive. Not because I thought confronting it would save me. Because I realized there was no saving myself anymore. There was only learning enough to warn someone else. The drive down the ramp felt like descending into a different version of the city, one that existed under the skin of the Chicago I knew. Lights flickered overhead in irregular patterns, like code I couldn't decipher. The same hum I'd heard before vibrated through the pavement, stronger now, deeper, resonant enough to buzz in my teeth. I parked near the unmarked door. For a long moment, I stayed inside the car. Hands on the wheel, trying to quiet my heartbeat. The tunnel stretched ahead of me. A corridor carved out of shadow and concrete. A place that held its breath. I stepped out. A strange clarity settled over me. The fear remained, yes, but it sharpened into something cold and deliberate. Something like acceptance. The chalk markings were brighter tonight. The pale lines glowed faintly in the dimness, as though freshly drawn. Some had changed shape since the previous nights. New angles. New intersections. Not graffiti. Not random signals. I walked slowly, scanning every surface. The hairs on my arms prickled. The underpass was too quiet, even for this place. Traffic noise from the upper roads didn't seem to penetrate tonight. The city above might as well have evaporated. It wanted privacy. Near the midpoint of the tunnel, I heard footsteps. Not mine. Measured, slow, approaching. I didn't turn right away. Instead, I steadied my breath and waited until the footsteps stopped. Then I faced the direction they'd come from. It was standing 20 yards away. Same suit, same silhouette, same unnaturally centered balance. But something was different now, something subtle but unmistakable. The way it held its shoulders, the way its hands rested, The way its head dipped slightly forward, like it was standing closer to being human than before. It blinked with perfect timing. "Detective," it said. Its voice was no longer an imitation. It was my voice layered with something deeper, like two tones played at once. I swallowed. "You've been calling me." "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. It sounded almost proud of the accomplishment. "Why?" Its head tilted, just slightly. No delay this time, no mechanical rhythm. A perfectly normal human gesture. "Learning," it said. "What are you learning?" It smiled. A real smile. Not perfect, not practiced. Something between curiosity and amusement. Faces, voices, choices. The last word lingered longer than it should have. I took a step toward it. "What happened to the others?" "The missing people." The smile faded. "Not here anymore." "Did you kill them?" It paused, then shook its head. "Not kill. Wrong word." "What's the right word?" It looked almost thoughtful. "They were trials. Fittings. They did not stay." Ghostly cold crawled through my veins. Why didn't they stay? "They did not match." Another pause. "You match." My stomach turned. "I'm not something you can take." "I do not take," it said. "I become." The simplicity of the statement hit with the weight of an avalanche. I felt it then, why it watched me, why it followed my voice, why it repeated the same phrases until it understood their shape. It didn't want to mimic me. It wanted to replace me. I steadied myself. "Why me?" "You are alone," it said. "You return. You do not fear the dark." "I do now." "That means you are ready." It took one step forward. The temperature dropped so sharply, I tasted metal on my tongue. Every instinct screamed to retreat, but I held my ground. "You can't become me," I said, forcing the words out past the dryness in my throat. It tilted its head again, same angle I'd used days earlier when questioning a witness. A posture so distinct, I recognized my own habits inside its movements. "I can," it said gently. "I am close now." Something shifted beneath its skin. The cheeks tightened. The brow creased. The exact pattern of tension I carried when concentrating. It was wearing my thinking face. I stumbled back a step. Its smile widened, as though pleased with the result. "You see," it said. "You see the fit." I realized, in that moment, that running wouldn't save me. Fighting wouldn't save me. Even shooting it, if bullets did anything at all, would only teach it something new about how I reacted under fear. So instead, I asked a question no sane person would ask. "What are you really?" The figure stilled. Something in the air tightened like a pulled string. "When the city was built," it said, "they made passages, hollow places, spaces for sound to gather. I grew there." "You grew?" "From echoes, from footsteps, from voices that repeated. I became shape from the shapes around me." It raised a hand, fingers curling experimentally, as though remembering the gesture from watching me. "People create reflections," it said. "I learned from them. I tried them on. Some did not work." It took another step, and I realized with chilling clarity that it was no longer copying me. It was becoming confident in its own version. "What happens to me?" I asked softly. "If you finish becoming me." It considered this. "You will go quiet," it said. "Quiet makes room for me." For the first time, it felt like a threat. A quiet one. A gentle one. But a threat carved out of inevitability instead of violence. I stepped back again, and this time, it followed with perfect synchrony, matching the timing of my movement as though tethered to me by invisible strings. "Not real. Real. Not real." My throat tightened. My pulse hammered. "You are almost finished," it said. "Soon I will fit. Soon you will rest." The words were calm, final, wrong. I turned and ran. Not because I thought I could escape, because running was the only act of defiance left to me. Behind me, its footsteps matched mine. Half a beat behind. Learning, always learning. Lower Wacker's lights blurred as I sprinted toward the car. I didn't dare look back. Not because I feared what I'd see, but because I feared I'd see my own silhouette chasing me. my own shape becoming something else. When I reached the car, I threw myself inside and tore out of the tunnel, speeding through red lights until the underpass was behind me and the city breathed again. But even then, even in the bright grid of downtown, I knew the truth. It had stepped out of the shadows for me. It had chosen me. And it wasn't finished learning. I didn't go back to the station. I didn't go back to the apartment. I drove until the streets blurred into a wash of neon and exhaust, until my hands ached from gripping the wheel. I ended up in a forgotten part of the West Side, parking beside an abandoned warehouse where no one would think to look for me. The air outside was cold and sharp, but it felt safer than the interior of the car, where every reflective surface threatened to show a face that wasn't mine. I sat against the warehouse wall, breath steaming, mind racing. My thoughts wouldn't line up straight. Every time I tried to replay the encounter, the sequence twisted, as if the memory were pliable clay being reshaped by invisible fingers. I could no longer swear whether it had smiled first or blinked first, whether it stepped left or right, whether I had spoken before it did, or if that was another detail it had fed back into me. Not real, real, not real. I kept saying it under my breath, not as reassurance, but as an anchor, something to hold me to myself. Around sunrise, when the city was still half dreaming, I realized I had only one option left. I needed to understand the rules of this thing, the logic underneath its mimicry. I needed to know what made a fit, and why it believed I was ready, because if I didn't understand that, I couldn't anticipate its next move. And I knew with the certainty of instinct that it had a next move. I drove back to my apartment, not because it was safe, but because I needed my notes. My thoughts were slipping like water through a cracked cup. Written words were the only chance I had left to preserve anything. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of concrete dust. The air was colder than the hallway outside. I checked every room. Nothing had been disturbed. But when I walked into the kitchen, I froze. On the table sat my notebook, open. I hadn't left it open. I approached cautiously, heart thundering. The handwriting on the exposed page was mine. It had my slant, my pressure, my spacing. But the words weren't mine. They were a list. Detective. Officer, help me. Find my car. Could you help me? I am looking. I am learning. I am close. My mouth went dry. The letters were perfect replicas of my hand, but the choices weren't human choices. They were practice lines, written the way I had once practiced signatures in grade school. I flipped to the next page, palms sweating. More words, more phrases. Alone makes your shape clear. Faces fit when alone. You come back. You are ready. Quiet makes room for me. The pen beside the notebook was still warm. It had been here, recently. I backed away from the table slowly. My eyes scanned the ceiling, the walls, the small cracks near the baseboards. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. But I felt a presence, as unmistakable as heat from a nearby fire. I packed the notebook and fled. After that, I checked into a cheap motel near the outskirts of the city. Somewhere forgettable. Somewhere where the walls were thin and the carpets were stained and nothing of value existed. The kind of place where no one notices new faces because everyone here has a reason not to be seen. I locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and sat on the edge of the bed. My thoughts spiraled. I tried to trace the pattern of the missing persons again, but the map in my head kept warping. Coordinates slipped, faces blurred. Street names rearranged themselves. Every time I grasped at a detail, it softened. It was inside the structure of my memory now, inside the folds of how I recognized myself. The shift became undeniable later that night. Sometime after midnight, I had drifted into a light sleep, something shallow and brittle, and woke with the sense that someone had just whispered in my ear. Not my name, my breath. A perfect match to the exhale I'd made seconds earlier. I sat upright, trembling, staring into the darkness. From the corner of the room far beyond the glow of the cheap orange lamp, I heard a faint sound. Footsteps, soft, precise, matching the tempo of my heartbeat. I held still. A silhouette emerged from the shadowed corner. Not walking, forming. as though the darkness itself were condensing into shape, into height, into shoulders that aligned exactly with mine. I could see the outline of a head, the angle of its jaw, the slope of its arms, a rough draft of me. Not real, real, not real. My chest tightened. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The silhouette spoke first. "My face," it said softly, "is almost ready." I stumbled back, knocking into the dresser. The lamp flickered. For a moment, the figure's shape sharpened, and I saw my own mouth move on its face. Not perfectly, a beat behind, but close enough that the room spun. "What do you want from me?" I whispered. "To finish," it said. The voice was nearly indistinguishable from mine. "Finish what?" "Becoming." I shook my head violently. It stepped closer. Its outline sharpened, and then, for the first time, it changed. Its shoulders widened by an inch. Its posture straightened. Its head tilted in a way that was unmistakably mine. An unconscious gesture I'd seen in mirrors for years. Something I'd never taught it. Something it had learned through watching. "You are tired," it said. "You want rest. I can rest for you." "I don't want your rest," I said, voice breaking. "I want my life." "You keep leaving pieces," it replied. "Pieces of you all around the city. I collect them." A fresh wave of cold surged through me. "What pieces?" It didn't hesitate. "Your footsteps, your voice, your choices, the moments you repeat." My thoughts fractured. Memories flashed in blurred snapshots. The way I paced in my apartment. The way I spoke to Morales. The way I walked alone at night. The way I hesitated when confronting the unknown. "You make a clear shape," it said. "Others were too loud, too changing. But you." It tilted its head, examining me with unsettling tenderness. "You are steady." A scream built in my chest, but I forced it down. Panic would only feed it. "You said the others didn't stay," I whispered. "What does that mean? What happens when you finish?" It took another careful step. "When the fit is complete," it said, "the old shape goes quiet." "You mean I die?" It blinked. "Wrong word. You will not need to choose anymore. You will not need to speak. I will speak for you." It reached toward me. I stumbled back again, hitting the wall. The lamp flickered once more, and in that flash, the creature's face fully formed into mine. Still imperfect, still lagging, but close. So close I felt the world shrinking. "Not real," I whispered. It smiled with my mouth. "Real," it replied. Something inside me cracked. I lunged past it, shoulders slamming into the motel door. The chain snapped. I ran down the hallway, barefoot, hardly seeing, hardly thinking. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me. Every sound echoed half a beat behind, as though a second set of footsteps trailed my own. When I reached the parking lot, I looked back. It stood in the doorway of the motel room. My height, my posture, almost my face, and it didn't chase me. It didn't need to. It had shown me what it would become. It had shown me what I would lose. I drove until dawn without stopping. At some point, the sky brightened, but it felt dimmer than before. The world itself seemed drained of shape, as though every building, every street, every sign had softened slightly around the edges. I realized, with a hollow ache, that it was not just becoming me, it was unmaking me, and I was running out of pieces to hold on to. If you're still listening, you already know more of my story than anyone else alive. Maybe more than I ever meant to say. I didn't plan on recording any of this when I checked into this nameless motel on the edge of the city. But plans don't matter much anymore. Not when something is learning your shape faster than you can hold on to it. I've tried to stay ahead of it. I've changed rooms 3 times tonight. Left through the back entrance, doubled back through the alley, walked in circles to confuse whatever sense it's using to track me. But no matter where I go, the air eventually settles in that same way, too still, too attentive, as if the walls themselves are leaning in to listen. I started speaking into this recorder because writing no longer works. The words in my notebook shift when I look away. Sentences I never wrote appear between the lines. Sometimes in my handwriting, sometimes in another version of my handwriting, older, cleaner, steadier, the version I used before all of this began. I don't trust the pages anymore. I don't trust my own memory. Recording is all that's left. A few minutes ago, I caught my reflection in the motel window. Not a mirror, just the faint sheen of glass after dark. At first, I thought it was me. Same height, same shoulders, same tired posture, but when I raised my hand to test it, the reflection didn't move. It just watched. I blinked. It didn't. That was when I realized it wasn't a reflection at all. It was a preview. Not real, real, not real. I keep repeating it, but the words don't anchor me the way they used to. The rhythm doesn't feel like my rhythm anymore. Sometimes, when I say it, I hear a faint whisper half a breath behind as though someone else is mouthing the same phrase, trying on the cadence. I don't have much time. I can feel something fraying inside me. A slow, unspooling at the edges of my thoughts. It's not painful. It's not even frightening now, which might be the worst sign of all. Fear would mean I'm still fully myself, but this is like drifting into a warm room after a long winter. Like surrendering. Like letting something stronger hold the weight I've been carrying, and I can't let that happen. I need to finish this. You deserve to know the last part. Earlier tonight, before I started recording, I went back to Lower Wacker one final time. I told myself I needed closure, evidence, answers, but when I got there, I realized the truth. It had called me back. The tunnels were quiet, quieter than I'd ever heard them. Not a single car passed, not a single drip echoed. Even the electric buzz of the overhead lights had gone still, as if holding their breath. The chalk symbols were everywhere now. Not faint or partial, but bold and unmistakable. Long lines intersecting circles. Angles that pulled the eye in strange directions. Patterns vibrating with a kind of intention I could feel in my teeth. They led me deeper and deeper, until I reached the same unmarked door it had vanished behind so many times. The door was open. Inside was a chamber I swear has never existed on any city map. A cavern carved from concrete and darkness. Rows of pillars reaching toward a ceiling too high to see, and shapes impressions embedded in the walls like the memory of people who'd once stood there. Not bodies, not faces. Suggestions of faces. Attempts. Drafts. Each one slightly wrong. A smile stretched too wide. Eyes placed a fraction too far apart. Cheekbones. At an unnatural angle. Not monstrous, just unfinished. I knew, instantly, who they were. The missing people, or what remained of their shapes. Before I could run, before I could even gasp, I felt it enter the chamber. Not from a door, not from a corridor, from everywhere, from the air. It formed behind me, footsteps aligning perfectly with the pace of my breath. I didn't turn around, not because I was brave, because I knew what I would see, a better version of me, stronger posture, cleaner presence, confidence I hadn't felt in years. My face, but without the doubts, without the where, without the fear. It didn't speak at first. It didn't need to. The chamber felt full of its intent. Then, softly, it said, "You can rest now." I shook my head. "No, I'm not done. I won't let you become me." "You already have," it said. "Listen to your thoughts." And that was when I realized the truth. Some of the thoughts in my head weren't mine anymore. Some of the phrases I repeated weren't mine. Some of the memories I clung to had seams edges stitched by something else. It stepped closer. I stepped back. The chamber swallowed both movements like a mirror, bending around its own reflection. Then it said the words that broke me. "You do not need to be afraid. I learned fear for you." Something inside me buckled. Something fundamental. I stumbled toward the exit, tripping over shadows that felt too solid. When I reached the street level again, the city looked wrong, tilted, stretched, subtly off, like someone had redrawn it from memory. I don't know how long I ran, or how far, only that I ended up here, in this motel, speaking into this recorder, leaving behind whatever pieces of myself haven't been rewritten yet. The door to the room just clicked, not opened, not knocked, clicked, as if someone tested the lock with a hand shaped exactly like mine. It's quiet now, too quiet, like the world is holding its breath again. If I stop speaking, I'm afraid my voice will go quiet inside me, and the only version left will be the one that isn't mine. The one practicing. The one perfecting the fit. So, I'll say this, as clearly as I can, before the last of me slips. If you're hearing this, it already knows you. If you've listened this far, it already has your voice. If you've pictured its shape, it has begun shaping you in return. Not real. Real. Not real. It's outside the door. I can hear. You don't believe me, do you?